So good evening, everybody, and welcome to Misinformation in the 21st Century. I am Marcella McGowan, and I am the Adult Services Librarian at the Cody Public Library. So let me go ahead and introduce our panel for today. So Lillian Gonzalez, good afternoon or good evening to where you're at. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm Ducky, thank you very much. So let me go ahead and just introduce everybody first, and then we'll just go into questions. So we also have Lorin Flores. Lorin, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Good. And DeeDee Lou, how are you?
I am well today, thank you.
No problem. Cool. Okay, so let me go ahead and just ask everybody the same question, okay? So, Lillian, let's start with you. How long have you worked at the San Antonio Public Library?
Yeah, so I've been working part-time at the Central Library since last November, so almost a year now.
Okay, cool. And what is your position?
I'm a library assistant.
Awesome. Okay. And then last question is, what excites you about this workshop?
Yeah, so I think in today's climate, especially like now during pandemic times, since we're all online all the time, I think it's really important to be aware of like what media you're consuming and kind of just, look out for the things that may actually not be true.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for that. And then DeeDee, I'll start with you. So I'm going to ask you again the same questions. What is your current position at the San Antonio Public Library?
Yes, I'm Lily's colleague. I also work out of Central Library, but I've been there a lot longer. I started in 2011, so it's been going on 9 years now.
Wow, okay.
And I also work mainly with adult patrons. So we call ourselves reference librarians, just meaning that we don't work with teens or children primarily. We serve adults. Yes, it's a wonderful place to work. I love being in the library. So I'm glad that I got a job there.
Okay. Great answer. And then since you tied that in, let me just ask you the last question. What excites you about this workshop?
Oh, many things. First of all, this is my first time doing a Zoom panel discussion.
Well,
so
welcome.
There's a bit of apprehension in that, but more than apprehension, I think I'm excited to learn from my colleagues, Lily and Lorin and you, because I'm sort of, I'm not involved in social media, so I'm especially excited to hear about deepfakes, things that that go on mainly on the internet and social media. So
okay, yeah. Good perspective. Okay, and then Lorin. So, what is your current position at the San Antonio Public Library?
So I'm an adult services librarian at Central, so I'm a colleague of DeeDee's and Lily's. And I've been working there, I say almost maybe about 2 years. I think I started in December 2018.
Okay. And then what excites you about this workshop?
Well, I think that it is really exciting because this is a real issue. It's really prominent in our news right now, and it's really informing the discourse and our political news and also just in general. And so I think it's a way that as librarians, one of the things that we do is we help provide and curate information. And I think it's really up our alley because one of the things that we do is we assist people in finding information and also evaluating it. And so to me, it's like a real, I would say, public interest type of topic. And so I'm really excited as well to hear what y'all, my colleagues, have to say, because again, I learn something every single time that I interact with one of my colleagues. And so for me, it's a great learning experience as well.
Okay, good. Excuse me. And it's kind of interesting that I'm the only one here from a branch and you guys are essential. So that's going to be a different perspective, I guess, in a sense, in terms of questions that may be coming in. So with that, let's go ahead and let's maybe talk about the first one. What is misinformation? So I have a generic term, and then what I'm going to do is maybe just go around and ask you guys what your feedback is. So as you can see here, we have the agenda. So we're going to just kind of just go down the list of the questions and things like that. Okay. So misinformation. So one of the easiest definitions that I found for misinformation is erroneous or incorrect information. And misinformation may not necessarily be deliberate, but it's just wrong or mistakes. So in your experience, DeeDee, do you notice patrons maybe asking questions either on the phone or maybe calling in about misinformation?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Especially with the pandemic, when there's a crisis, there's a lot of fear going around, and that's a ripe environment for rumors and urban legends, things people calling about when the pandemic first started is that, it was started in a lab by China to spread it to the United States, to harm us, things like that. And they hear a lot on the internet, and some of them actually believed it, and they will be ranting about it, and I just let them, have their say, and then I would just ask them, do you know the source of the news that you got? Do you know what website you got it on? And then when you go down, you want to read about the people who set up the website, or if you hear from social media, you kind of have to look at where the information comes from.
I see. Yes.
And most of them actually, when I spend a few minutes talking with them, they kind of calm down. People are fearful of the crisis.
Yes.
Make everybody fearful. So yes, they just want somebody to hear them out. And if you talk to them in a respectful manner, don't just dismiss their information outright. You want to explore it with them to see where this information is coming from.
Gotcha.
And in a way, when you treat people with due respect, they return the favor most of the time.
Definitely. Lorin, what is your take on misinformation?
Well, I would just to add, because I agree with what DeeDee is saying, and really the things that I would add would be, I know that a lot of misinformation can spread through memes, and it's really, really easy for people to see something, think it's funny, and you pass it along, and you don't realize that you are an agent of misinformation because you haven't examined the content of what you're sharing critically and made a value judgment on that. And I'm really, really hoping that one of the takeaways from the sessions that we're doing is, at least for me personally, to be more mindful of the stuff that I'm sharing on social media, because it is a place where people get their news quite a bit. And so I really think that there's that. There's also, disinformation, which is different. That's when people are actually really trying to misinform you. And I think that that's the other part that I think what comes into this equation is that, sometimes you will be interacting with someone who isn't real, or they may be a bot, or they may be a person that is trying to achieve an agenda.
Okay.
So that's what I would add.
Gotcha. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then Lily, hi, I see your face. Can you hear me okay? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I finally got it working.
Cool.
Hello,
Okay,
Lily.
awesome.
Finally see you.
Good. Yeah. So the same question. How would you define misinformation?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely like not only about the aspect of like something that's false, like something that isn't based in truth, but also just like, I think something that is being distributed for like nefarious reasons. So it's like to, spread something that isn't true. At the end of the day, kind of like that spread then plant seeds of like different movements that may not be great for society. So I think for me personally, like I just rewatched this episode of The Weekly from the New York Times about like YouTube's algorithm in connection to like far right conspiracy theories in Brazil, and how that really like propelled like a movement of people to not really like Lorin was saying, like not Lorin and DeeDee were saying just like how we're not like looking at the sources of things, we're just like looking at like
all of these different like videos or all of these different like people and not really looking at like the facts of the matter.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So thank you guys for that information, because I think we pretty much hit it on the head exactly where and how people are getting information. And something DeeDee said is when we're talking to patrons, be respectful, you know, because again, some people will take it and just run it with gospel in a sense. And sometimes we just have to just maybe just pause a second and just kind of take it back and let's re-examine that information. So thank you for that.
Marcella, can I
yes.
ask something? Are we gonna talk about the differences? Because Lily mentioned about nefarious conspiracy theories. I think that kind of falls into disinformation as opposed to misinformation, because disinformation is a deliberate attempt to spread false information for a purpose,
Right.
for nefarious purpose a lot of the times, you know, and it's usually from an organization. It's an organized attempt to misconstrue facts for a purpose.
And do you, and maybe we can just ask the panel, do you think that it's something that is widespread, or how can we educate our patrons on dispelling disinformation? And maybe we can just go down the line. Lorin, what do you think?
So I think that the biggest thing would be to remind folks to be sure to examine every incoming piece of information critically. And I know that's really hard because we're all bombarded with so many things in social media, the stuff that we see on the news, but it is something that we always have to have our guard up. I know that there's several different ways, there's several different methods that people have talked about, like the CRAP test, which sounds really silly. There's also SIFT. So there are different acronyms that you can use to look at what you're reading and try to make sense of it. And I know that that's something that we'll be talking about in some of our workshops. So I would definitely say that as well. And then the other thing too that I was going to mention, I'm doing a little plug here for my workshop, but there's also the idea too of propaganda. And so there's definite propaganda methods, and that's also part of our political landscape, but also it's part of advertising as well. And so I think it's really helpful when people are attuned to that and you learn to recognize what you're seeing, and it's very, very helpful.
Most definitely. And then Lily, you got anything to share with that?
Yeah, no, I think that distinction is definitely important that DeeDee brought up with disinformation. I think for me, I see like the lines blurring more between like misinformation and disinformation, where kind of people aren't realizing that the misinformation they're sharing then becomes like the catalyst for like disinformation. Because it's like we're just, you know, scrolling, and then we like find the most like shocking or like kind of just like the news that really like catches our eye and kind of like makes us want to share it, even if we haven't looked up the source, and we just kind of like want to, you know, let people know what we've seen, but then not then understand that like what we're sharing is misinformation.
Okay.
Well, I think we all guilty of that, because we have so many things thrown at us on the internet that it's hard for us to read beyond the headlines, especially if the headlines is appealing to our own biases. You know, so it's you know, that confirmation bias. We kind of skip over things that we don't agree with and kind of zero in on things that we agree with. And that's fine. We all have our own biases. But the main thing is to be aware of that. Just like when you listen on the news, and if, say, I listen to NPR, I think I'm jumping ahead about the source of news, but if they report on Facebook, they will also say that we just want you to know that Facebook is one of our supporters. You know, so that as long as it's out there and not hidden, you know, the biases is not hidden, then it allows the listener or the viewer to make up their own judgment about what they're hearing. you know, because it's an informed view. You get the biases out there already. So it's up to you to whatever part of the news you're taking to see, okay, to see the filter that news might be presented through.
Right.
Yeah, and you know, propaganda is also it's a spin. It's a spin thing, like political conventions are mainly propaganda, but it's not totally misinformation because some of it might be factual, but they would just spin it or present it in a way that is favorable to the point of view they want to convey to you, to sort of persuade you to see things their way, which is okay too, you know, but
Right.
as long as we're aware of that, you know, and not just blindly, like Marcella said, take things as gospel, as long as we think critically and evaluate our information before we consume it wholesale. You know?
Okay, thank you. And then I think we're gonna take a poll and do a survey and see, because you guys talked about a lot of different things in terms of platforms and things like that. So we've got, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, all these different medias coming at people. So with that being said, with all the different platforms, do you guys, what would you impart to patrons in terms of who should I listen to? Which platform should I get on? Should I listen to one? Should I get on more than one, etc.? So let's start with DeeDee. What do you think?
I actually try not to tell patrons what to do.
Okay.
You know, I would present some options and then let them make up their minds. So yeah, if they want to use Twitter for their news feed, well, there's some good information on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just when you look at things online, there's so much. But if it's important to you, if a certain news article is important to you, before you try to inform your friends or relatives about this, try to spend a little bit more time beyond the headline, read beyond the headline, and see, if the content makes sense. Consider the source. Who's the author? Is the author an authorized expert? An expert in the field, or the publication source. If it's from reputable news source like New York Times or Washington Post. Well, they are reputable to most people, but not to all, of course. And check the date. Some of the news are out of date, and Lorin can tell you this. She had an example this morning. She can tell you about. Or is it, if it's too outrageous, is it a joke? Or is it satire? And not really facts.
Right.
And then when really, I also consult some websites that do fact checking for me, because there are professionals, fact checkers. That's what they do. They're paid to do these things. So they do a more thorough job, So if so I consult those websites as well.
Okay, so let's take a quick poll. And this one is the poll about where do you get your news? So I'm going to put the poll up, and it's if you can just take maybe 30, 40 seconds or so to answer the question about where do you get your information from? And then once we get that information, I'm going to ask the panel to address some of the different websites. And with that being said, it's going to segue into non-sample websites, because there's a lot of times people go to different websites to get information. So I'm just going to ask our panel, what is your most frequent place to go to? So Lorin, I'll just start with you.
Thank you, Marcella. So I'm going to transition to my personal, and this is one site. This is called PolitiFact, and I'm a very visual person. And so one of the things that I love about this site is it will give you your fact checks and have a little meter next to it, and it will tell you whether it's false or true. Some things may be mostly false or mostly true, but at any rate, it will give you a really good read and assessment on things that are current in the news and things that people have said. So that would be one. There's also factcheck.org, which is another good site, and that will also examine different claims and deliver an assessment and verdict on their veracity. And then the other one that I use a lot too is Snopes.com, and some of it is mostly like urban legends, but they do have a lot of current events that pop up.
Okay. And Lily, what is your favorite non-sample website to go to?
So I will say, I do use Twitter a lot. I'm very guilty of that. But I have tried to curate like my feed to like include like journalists that I trust more. So then like people where I'm like, oh, like this is this viewpoint versus that viewpoint, where I kind of like find those journalists where I'm like, okay, like I trust your opinion, and then I'll find like my sources like from here. But also like just subscribing to like the AP like newsletter, so I get like daily information rather than going to like news sites that may be like a little bit more leaning one way or the other politically. Yeah, I usually just like go to AP so I can like get the nuts and bolts of like what news is like going on for the day.
Okay, thank you. And then DeeDee, what do you use?
Okay, okay. Sorry, I just have to unmute myself. So the source of news that I use, since I spend so much time looking at the screen, I try not to get my news from a screen, mainly from the internet, even though there's a lot of sources on there. But I mainly listen on the radio on NPR, because NPR get not only news in the United States, but if you listen, they also have the BBC World News at night, that you get views from other parts of the world. So I kind of want to have a broader views of news. So that's kind of my main source. But of course, I get the email updates from CNN, from Washington Post, and New York Times mainly. But it's very hard to make times to really read all the news that come into my email. So mainly, if I just turn on the radio in the morning when I'm getting my breakfast before I go to work, and then when I come home, preparing dinner, I listen to more, and then at night I listen to BBC. That's about my daily news feed.
Okay. So thank you for that. So the next question is, how do you spot bad statistical information? So before we get into that discussion, I'm gonna throw a question. So how do you know when you're reading fake news, which goes into statistical information? So if you could just take me to which to answer that, and then we can just kind of go into what I would consider bad statistical information. For example, 4 out of 5 women suggest that Sally Henson's nail polish is the best product on the market. So to me, that's something I would consider bad statistical information. So let me just go down the line and see what is your, how would you classify bad statistical information? Lily, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think like anything that seems that holds majority, I think I'm always like, well, let me double check that. Like I would be like very suspect of like 4 out of 5 women thinking that like one brand of nail polish is like the best one, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also things that may like have like a very like low number, I think is also like anything that I feel in that context. So let's say like only 1% of the United States speaks Spanish. Like that off the top of my head, I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like it's true. And so I think just like thinking about like one is, and then 2, like what the context of the conversation is. Sometimes it's hard because it's like, it seems like it could be right with both like the context and number, but I think just kind of, double checking those statistics is really important because they're thrown around a lot as well, I think, particularly in like political context. And so I think it's important to double check those.
Gotcha. DeeDee, what are your idea? What do you think?
Well, just what the example you gave, I think you said about in this 4 out of 5 women use this Hansen nail
Sally Hansen, yes.
Yes. Well, first of all, it doesn't make sense, because there are so many brands of nail polishes out there. So how did they arrive at this conclusion? So first of all, when you read something, see if it makes sense. And then if it doesn't make sense, then dig deeper to see how they got that data. How many people did they sample? and what is the method? They just might sample 10 people and then or 5 people, and all those people, they only give them samples, maybe 2 brands, and maybe they doctored the nail polish to make Hansen a much better spread on your nail than the other. You just have to really dig deeper if the information doesn't make sense to you. So that's just my common sense approach.
Gotcha.
Because I'm not a statistician, and you know how they say about statistics, lie, damn lies, and then statistics.
Right, right. Lorin, what are your thoughts?
I think that generally when I see a statistic, the first thing that I do is I try to figure out where it came from. So sometimes they will have a link, or like, especially if they're talking about scientific research, I'll actually go and try to find the article so that I can read the source and see what's happening with that. I would also add that in addition to Lily and DeeDee, I'm just really skeptical. I look at the sample size. I look at any other factors that might be part of it. Like if they say, if it's a crime statistic, then you can go to the FBI site and look at the uniform crime reports and things like that. So I do try to verify that. And sometimes also people will put things that are misleading. And I have an example. And again, I'm moving to my website, or a website on my page. Sorry, I'm repeating that. So I'm going to move to a link that I have on my computer right now. This is something that came up on my Twitter feed this morning, and it was a news article from BBC, which I normally think is pretty acceptable and valid. And if you look at the headline, it's talking about the numbers of officers that have been killed in the line of duty, and it looks really sensational. That's a big number. But then if you look more closely at the article, they're talking about that particular number representing the amount of people that have been killed in the line of duty since 1680. And so that changes that number quite a bit. It's a lot less, sensationalistic, I would say. So those are my thoughts, though.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Which leads me into, I'm gonna throw another poll up on the screen. So you talked about BBC. Everybody kind of talked about different too. So the poll that I'm gonna put up is, do you rely on any of the following for news? So just take about maybe 30 or 40 seconds which to answer that, because it kind of leads into, to me, going into some of the library database. We have over 109 places, and there are some go-to places that you may want to go to that would be helpful to kind of help dispel some information. So maybe if you want to get scholarly articles and things like that, I would kind of go to Academic Search Premier. If I wanted to get something on medical advice, COVID and things like that, do I just listen to willy-nilly something on Wikipedia, or do I go to something, we have Medline and then Medline Plus. So maybe just kind of going through the list of, not the list of different databases, but what are some of your favorite go-to ones? And Lorin, I'll start with you.
So this is Credo reference. All you would have to do is type in a topic. It has a lot of different information. They have a lot of specialty encyclopedias. So you have your Encyclopedia Britannica and things like that, where you have general descriptions, but we also have encyclopedias that are specific to a particular topic. So like the first one is military history. So depending on what you're researching, that might be really helpful. Like if you're doing something for like health information, you might want to look at a medical dictionary as opposed to a general dictionary, because it's going to be more specific to that field. They have this wonderful feature, which is a concept map. So you can see if you're a visual person, this is disinformation. These are some other topics that are related to it. And so I don't know how the slide guitar is related to disinformation, but you can click on those and you'll see the different topic areas. But this is a really, really good resource for general information, or just a beginning place if you're looking for just background information on a topic that you don't know very much about. And then the other one that I really, really love is called Opposing Viewpoints. And it is really fabulous because it is meant for people that are doing research in maybe speeches, or if you want to keep abreast of current events. It gives like a mini capsule of different topics that are in the news. And so they do change, they do update the topics as you go along. I think I had, and I'll pick one of these really quickly. I think I had one up earlier. So I had universal basic income, but it's really awesome because it will give you an overview of a topic, and then you can look at different types of resources, and you'll see that there's featured viewpoints. So they'll give you vetted opinions from reputable sources. And so you'll get to see a position, you know, for and against, so that you can compare and contrast. They also have images, they have news, videos, statistics. I'm going to mention academic journals as well, because I don't know if many people are familiar with those, but we have our popular periodicals. So you'll have like newspapers, magazines, things like that. That type of information has, you know, vetting, like fact checking. But if you're looking for something that's more academic oriented, they do have a type of publication called an academic journal. And so they have an extra layer of vetting that the information goes through. And so if you're looking for something more scientific, I would recommend using an academic journal, because it goes through a peer review process where people that are experts in a certain field will actually analyze the article and make sure that it conforms to scientific method and that the information is correct, and then they publish it. So again, if you're looking to maybe fact check something, or if you want to be researching something that is more scientific, like climate change or something like that, that's a really good resource.
Okay.
So DeeDee, what are some of your favorite databases to go to?
Well, you know, some of them you already mentioned, Marcella. My go-to is usually the Academic Search Complete database here, because it covers a lot of academic topics. So it's very comprehensive. So if you do a research paper at the college level, I would go there. There are a lot of research databases for children and geared toward children and teens too. But since I don't work with them, I'm not familiar with them, but they're there. We have 109 databases, cover all ages. And then the Opposing Viewpoint is really good too. I like that, the one that Lorin mentioned, for topics that you want to present a viewpoint, but then you also want to have a balanced discussion, so you present the opposing view. Okay, and then I also use, you also mentioned the medical information, which I use a lot of, is Medline Plus. Now Medline, if I go down here to the M up there, but to the M here, Medline Plus is presented in simple layman's language, okay? And actually you can go on the internet and put Medline Plus there. You don't have to go through our database. We have it, okay? Is the kind of information that I would send to my friends and relatives because it's easy to understand. Whereas Medline Plus, if you're doing medical research and it's more geared toward a medical professional. Okay, so the language is more scientific, and it's maybe harder to comprehend than Medline Plus. So yeah, those main things that I use. I use also legal forms. People come in to ask for legal forms all the time. So I use that legal forms here, and Reference USA. You use that for business research or just directory of businesses or people in individuals. So we have so many good reference databases that I use them off and on all the time, but I just the ones that I mentioned, the ones I use the most. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And those are some great ones. Lily, what about you? Do you have any ones that you would like to share that are some of your favorites?
Yeah, so let me go ahead and share my screen here. See if I can do that. So I personally, I love the New York Times. I think there's just so much information that you can access there. And then the little thing down here, because you are able to access from home, but I believe only 48 hours of access that you're granted for each special code. But that like gives you free reign to just like look up anything from like any point in time that the New York Times has published. And also I'm, speaking of like medical stuff, up here, the Natural Alternative Treatments is a really cool website where you can like kind of look up different therapies and stuff. So maybe like you're looking for like a different type of medical information that may not be so centered in Western practices, then you can kind of go down this list here of different therapies, but also just different herbs and supplements that you can look at in order to kind of assess like what alternative treatment you might be able to use for yourself. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, opposing viewpoints is like super helpful. Very good database to like just find not only like information on a subject, but just kind of like maybe also see a point of view that isn't your own, to kind of like figure out like why someone on like the opposing side of you perhaps like is yeah, I mean, that's typically for me like the ones that I definitely go to whenever I go to the databases.
Okay. So thank you guys for sharing that, because I think with the wealth of databases that we have, I think we pretty much would be able to, when I say we, the library system as a whole will be able to answer a lot of questions that are on the agenda or on the minds of a lot of patrons, everything from elections to the COVID to climate change and things like that. So thank you guys for sharing that information. So the last question that I'm gonna ask is, maybe you guys just kind of going down the list, talking about some of the upcoming workshops and where people can register for those, and maybe just giving us a snippet as to what those workshops will consist of. Lorin, I'll go with you. I'll start with you first.
Thank you, Marcella. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly and just quickly go to, let me get to my web browser. And let me navigate really quickly to the library's home site. And so if you go to our site, and let me just adjust the view a little bit here. If we go to events calendar, we do have our workshops here. And mine, I believe, is going to be on the 12th of October. And so I'm going to get the entry pulled up really quickly. And so it's propaganda. And so what we'll be doing is we're going to talk about the different types of propaganda. Some people say they're 7, some people say that they're 11, and we'll just talk about recognizing them and also just places where they appear.
Okay, thank you. And then DeeDee, can you tell us a little bit about your workshop and how people, and again, I'm not going to say how to register because it's going to be in the same place, but maybe just about your workshop.
So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing the screen to show the list of workshops we have. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm gonna show you our events calendar on our website. So if you can just go to our hits on events and news, you'll see our events calendar. And here, if you just in box, you can just put misinformation, and then you'll see the listing of all of our workshops under this topic. So today, the panel discussion to give an overview. But in the next 3 weeks, Lily is gonna do the deepfake. Excited and looking forward to view and participate. And then Lorin will do the propaganda, and then I will do the hoaxes and health. And at this time of COVID pandemic, there are so much misinformation out there that, and I do the library guide on COVID-19. I will emphasize information from there as well. And you notice that each next sessions, there's a sign up link that you can sign up for, so we can give you the password, the information to join the session when it becomes available. Okay.
Okay. And really, last but not least, can you tell us a little bit about your workshop?
Yeah, so I'll be doing a deepfakes presentation, like looking for examples of when audio or image is being manipulated in a piece of media that you're seeing. So the first thing that comes to mind for me right now is Joe Biden and him playing Despacito at his rally in Florida, and then that being, it's mostly a meme, but some people, might not take it that way. It was being used instead, playing an NWA song. So that kind of like information that is manipulated, and seeing how it can affect someone's point of view, like why are these being made, and how to spot them when you're scrolling through your.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk about the upcoming workshops. So I hope everybody will tune in to each and every one of those. So I would like this time to thank, Lorin Flores, DeeDee Liu, and Lillian Gonzalez for joining us for this session of Misinformation in the 21st Century. And again, I'm Marcella McGowan, and thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella.